about this Causeway Company because this leads out to Port Aransas where we're trying to get this archive started. And we feel like if we can get there, then we'll know how the procedure going on from there. So Larry, you get us there historically.
In June 1939, I came to Aransas Pass and began work for the Harbor Island Causeway Company, which owned the 6 miles of railroad track out to Harbor Island. There were other companies involved, the Aransas Dock and Channel Company, the Harbor Ferry Company, the Harbor Island Transportation Company, which were the buses, and I believe that was about it. All of this was owned by the Alexander Brown and Sons out of Baltimore, Maryland, and the original causeway was a railroad track consisting of a roadbed and about 7 bridges or trestles. Later, the causeway was built so that cars could travel over the track and roadbed. Prior to that time, they had hauled cars out on railroad beds. I remember quite well the train was still running. All it was hauling to Harbor Island at that time was rock for the jetties. One of my duties, besides keeping books for the 5 corporations and getting out a fishing bulletin every morning, was when the train would run, I'd get in a pickup and travel ahead of the train to warn tourists to pull off into the turnout. Frequently, there would be more cars than there were turnouts, and I would have to get some of the tourists to back off the bridges. And they were very terrified because they had no idea that a railroad that ever came out there, or a train that ever came out that way. And the old engineer at that time was fond of his sauce, and he would be pretty well loaded. And I knew that if I didn't get them off that bridge, he'd run over all of us. He would not have stopped. But at that particular time, I believe they were charging $1 per car each way. Later, they increased that to $1.50, I believe. But the history of the Causeway Company was they would ever so often get hit by a tropical hurricane and have to rebuild several of their bridges and was never able to make any money. It was several $1 million in the red at the time I worked for them. Later, one of the Murchisons pulled a real fast deal, bought the causeway and all of its allied interests, including the docks that were then the Atlantic docks, the ferries, which I believe at that time there were 2, the Estelle and the Nellie B. One of them was a wood ferry. Murchison bought this from the Alexander Brown and Sons, all of these properties, and the right-of-way on each side of the causeway going to Port Aransas, or to Harbor Island, and quite a lot of right-of-way or eminent rights between here and Rockport and Ingleside. He was able to pay for what he paid for the Causeway Company by just the sale of the docks to the Atlantic people, and he more than paid for it that way. Then he shut the causeway down, and that forced Nueces County to come in and buy the causeway from him, he retaining many other interests in that transaction. The most memorable thing about those times to me was the fact that you could go to Port Aransas and drive a quarter of a mile down the beach and be all alone. There was no condominiums. Mr. and Ms. Ellis still had the Tarpon Inn at that time. That was before they had passed away. There were many fine people there, still are, but so many that I knew at that time are gone now. The days of the old causeway were wild and woolly. It was quite a thrill to ride with someone who was accustomed to driving over the causeway and you weren't, because those old loose boards were really rattly and it was a sight to behold. I don't know of much else that would be of historic value on this. I do recall that Mr. W.A. Keyberger and W.A. Scrivener were the people I worked for with the Causeway Company. and Mr. A.H. Moore had retired the year that I started to work for the company. I remained with him until 1942, at which time the fishing industries began to be something, and I've been in the fishing industry ever since. Anything else, Betty Ann, you think that might be of interest?
Yeah, can you tell us about the traffic, how one car would start at one end, and coming to it, who would decide which is going to drive out on the little turnout?
Oh, yeah, that would be what you call a Mexican standoff. I've seen lots of fights over that. They'd just get up there, and neither one would give until after some time of cursing and fist shaking. I remember some of the businesses out there. There was a man by the name of Newton, was one of the last train robbers in the United States. And he'd gotten out of the penitentiary. He had never found the money that he and his brothers took off the train. But he came to Port Aransas and opened a Buckhorn Saloon. Had silver dollars in the floor as you walked in. Had a fine collection of trophy deer heads. And he failed to have an agreement with other people, and a penny box of matches and 5-gallon can of gasoline put him out of business overnight. He was still cursing Roosevelt. He found out he had to withhold Social Security, and he called Roosevelt a jake-legged son of a bitch that had taken all the substance out of everything. Here's this old train robber. He was something else. There were other places out there, Aggie South and Roy Hyder, and I remember Mexican-American lady who sold hot tamales out there. Yeah. They were about the best hot tamales I ever ate.
They were delicious. Mrs. Sue Belcher's little pie house cafe was also out there. And on the waterfront where the ferry landed in 1939 was right between, let's see, what places? South and Green Fish House.
That's right. It was right between those two places. And then right across was the Harbor Island store that Carol Parsons operated.
That's right.
As I recall, the Harbor Island Causeway Company owned the Harbor Island store, but they leased it to Carol on the basis of its receipts or something like that.
That's right. I remember that too. Then let's see.
Lloyd Fender took a package truck out every day, brought freight to the island.
Yeah. And they had a little bus that came from Aransas Pass to Port Aransas on that causeway, which we used a great deal in coming back and forth to school.
Was that the Harbor Island Transportation Company? The company owned, yeah. I had driven that bus.
Yes, I know. And the fog, those were hair-raising mornings, and we'd come in on that. And then I also remember that there were several accidents. People would leave the island after having been partying so much and run off the causeway.
Oh, yeah. A lot of that. When I left the Causeway Company, it was right after a hurricane had hit. I remember on my birthday going out to the island with Mr. Keyberger and swimming out to the South Pier to the end to count how many pilings would have to be replaced. And as I recall, there's been no hurricane hit this part of the state after my birthday, September 24th.
Yeah.
This was on September the 24th when I was assessing the damage, but the hurricane had hit before that. Then they put me to work bringing workers out to repair the causeway, and there was some at Harbor Island. There was a stretch of the causeway they were working on. Mr. Scribner was standing there with his pinstripe suit on, right in the middle of the road, and I stopped. I was in a hurry to get back because Evelyn had the baby in her arms. I was going to take her to shop for the specials, you know. And Mr. Scribner wouldn't budge. And I asked him to budge, and he just turned his back on me, and I made an interesting suggestion as to what he could do with that 6 miles of causeway and back the bus off of there and quit.
Can you describe how they raised that little drawbridge at Morrison Cummings Cut? I was thinking about that.
It was an old windlass, just a crude windlass. The guys lived on that little island out there at the drawbridge, and if someone wanted the bridge raised, they'd toot their horn. The boat traffic coming through there, they would come out and wind that thing up just like a old windlass.
Yeah. Once or twice we had to do that, or did it before we got there, and it made us late for school.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't remember. It seemed to me like he lifted that thing up out of between two piling or something, two sills that went across there.
Well, there was a kind of a counterbalance on it, and you could wind the thing up and down.
Yeah.
Was that all line that runs beside the causeway put before the causeway, or was that made with the causeway? You know, those black pipes?
No, they were put in there after. When the railroad was built, they were building ships at Harbor Island, concrete ships.
Oh yeah.
That was World War I. And a number of those ships were in operation for some time after that, hauling crude oil from Tampico, and those lines were laid after that. The causeway was built before. In fact, Gail Borden Munsell at one time tried to take over that causeway. That's of the Borden family, you know.
Yeah.
And he was quite a playboy. And I don't know who else besides Gail Borden Munsell entered into it. But I know at the time I was working for the company, all the reports went to Alexander Brown and Sons, investment bankers out of Baltimore.
Well, now, during World War II, which is the only one we've been through since we've been here, they were still hauling talc from Harbor Island.
Calling what?
Talc, T-A-L-C.
Oh, talc, like you make talcum powder out of? Well, I wasn't aware of that.
Well, I remember one big ship that would come in every so often, and then the little train would bring out several carloads of that.
Well, they may have done that right after you came in 37. Because I don't recall any after I went to work in 39. They just hauled jetty rock out there and placed it on barges, and they took it on to repair or extend the jetties.
Well, are you under the impression that previous to our remembrance of this, that cotton was shipped from there?
I think so. I think it was, yes.
And other...
At that time, I remember seeing old publications where they were trying to promote Port Aransas where sail meets rail, you know.
Yeah.
And the town of Aransas Pass was, they hoped that would be the port one day. And they sold the town side on that basis. They had a lottery. You buy a lot, you get a number. You might win a hotel and things like that. It was the last land lottery that was ever held in the state of Texas. At that time, I remember seeing old publications where they were trying to promote Port Aransas where sail meets rail, you know.
Yeah.
And the town of Aransas Pass was, they hoped that would be the port one day. And they sold the town side on that basis. They had a lottery. You buy a lot, you get a number. You might win a hotel and things like that. It was the last land lottery that was ever held in the state of Texas. You got a lot of people in trouble. It was against the law. But for that reason, you still find people that own lots in the Aransas Pass that won't sell them. They still think the sale's going to meet the rail. I think King Ranch outdid us on that by having the Corps of Engineers, Colonel rewrite his recommendation. He had recommended Aransas Pass for the deepwater port originally, only 6 miles with the prevailing winds to keep the channel washed out. But they took him to King Ranch and little bourbon and steaks and a losing poker hand made him change his mind. And he made it 20 miles diagonally across Crawford's Bay, which is constantly filling up. There was a lot of bitterness still around about that when I came to Randall's.
There was when we came, I know, too. Well, the little train, the little car, or little automobile that pulled the flat cars, that the automobiles drove up on.
Well,
Wasn't that still around when we came?
it was there at the Causeway office in
Wasn't it a
side
Ford?
track.
Wasn't
I think it
a
was.
Ford?
They still use it a little bit for running equipment out there. I think it was a Ford truck that was pulling it.
That was interesting too. That was before. They never did pull automobiles after we came, but I remember my brother came out here fishing in the early 20s with some people from Oklahoma City, and they put their car up on it and went out.
Oh yeah, I remember they had a derrick on it for some reason. They were to do repair. And that last hurricane, the hurricane in 1942, got that thing started going down the track towards Port Aransas as the wind came from the west. And it must have been making 100 miles an hour when it hit the curve, and it went over and broke a telephone pole, a light pole.
The derrick did?
Yeah, the whole car and everything just
God.
like a sail that just took it on out. You remember Popeye that ran the ferry?
Yes. We have some pictures
Got
of
pictures
Popeye.
right here.
I imagine Spanny took those pictures. He sold them as postcards.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
him.
he did.
He looked more like Popeye than Popeye did. His name was Tabor, yeah. Popeye the Sailor Man, J.M. Tabor, Port Aransas. Yeah.
He's been digging those up. Well, did the Causeway Company own, how much land did they own on the sides? Did they own just the tracks and all?
No, all of the right of way on both sides is still owned by the Murchisons or his successors. You can't, if you have a bait stand between you and Port Aransas, you have to pay it's on a 30-day rent deal. You just month to month have to rent. You don't own it.
All privately owned.
Right.
Oh.
And what about on the
I suppose that Humboldt and Atlantic, that's the two lines at the time. I guess it's Fina now. I guess they were given the right to lay the lines there. I don't guess they have to pay any rent for that now. But all the rest of it, for several hundred feet, roughly, the water line on both sides is owned privately to this day. Because when the county bought it, they didn't get that. It was retained by the buyers.
the
I
land?
mean, the sellers.
Smart move.
Oh, yeah.
Well, what about do you have a train house or like a roundhouse or something, or do you just go backwards and forwards?
It was just a kind of a shed behind the Causeway office, and there wasn't a turnaround. It just go back out, go out forward, and back in.
Was that down here where you came in?
It was.
Seawall there?
No, by the railroad.
It's just right after you cross the railroad track going to Port Aransas. It was a big two-story building.
Oh, I remember that building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big yellow building.
And later they tore it down.
There was a stack of bricks there for a long time.
Yeah.
I always wanted to get those.
Yeah, a lot of fire bricks there.
Yeah.
They used those in it was an old steam locomotive. But there's so many things that I could have latched on to that were thrown away. I'd like to have the bell off that locomotive.
Oh, yeah. What happened to it?
I don't know. They sold it for scrap for that, I'm sure.
Do you remember how much you got paid for working it? Was it a lot? And for the time, you know?
Oh, yeah. I went to work. They didn't know if I could handle the 5 sets of books or not. They started me off at $85 a month. They raised me to $100. They found out I could make it. But groceries, you get by on $15, $20 a month for groceries. You walk, you didn't drive. $1 went a long way.
Well, the first cottages that we rented for $5 a day, and everybody had to go get their own ice,
Yeah.
and we didn't have hot water.
No. $5 a day, that was a lot of money.
Yeah.
Just the elite came down at that price.
Never did. Now $45 is just the ordinary price.
Right.
Come on, see? It's impossible.
A
Well,
lot of famous people came through there in their day. Remember Wrong Way Corrigan? You remember him?
Yeah.
He was through there.
and Amy Simpson.
Amy Simple, Mike Pearson was there.
Was that when she had disappeared, or was that?
I think that was before she made her disappearing act. Don't know who she was there with, but
You stayed at Tarpon Inn.
right.
Most of those Tarpon scales are still on the wall out there.
FDR signed one of them.
Yeah.
Well, was that a steam engine? The train?
Oh yes, it was an old-timey steam engine. Had to get up steam every morning.
Did y'all use coal or wood to burn it?
They used diesel
Oh.
to fire the boilers.
Well, I noticed all the wood when we drive across was laid the wrong way. Your wheels would grab it and it'd do like that.
Yeah, it was
Was
really
that
thick.
because the tracks were there and they couldn't lay it the other way or something? Because it was a weird.
I don't know, but they really were rattling.
Yeah.
We had a section foreman, name was Morehouse. Son, Tad Morehouse, is in lumber business now. And he had a group of Mexican laborers. Most of them were from across the river. He tried to, he could speak a little Spanish, and one of the Mexicans told me, he said, Mr. Morehouse, he speaks pretty good Tracky.
Was this when it was, the ferry landing was on this side of the island?
The ferry landing was moved a couple of times. They moved it once. You went, the road that goes, they call the old ferry landing, it used to go right between the two tank batteries. The Humboldt tanks were on the left, I believe, as you went out, and the Atlantics were on the right. You went right between them, and it was would have been quite a bit more to the left from where the landing is now, right?
Oh, yes. Come on.
Then when the county took over the causeway of the highway department, they did a lot of construction and they had a temporary landing. It's where you go on Harbor Island, you turn off and go straight across. There's what they call the old ferry landing where the boats dive.
Yeah.
They operated from there for a while. That was a longer run.
Mm-hmm.
But after they got all their construction completed, they changed it around.
And it changed on the other side, equally. It first went between Green's Fish House and Sue Belcher's Cafe.
Right.
Or no, it was Miss Felton's, wasn't it?
I believe it was, yeah.
And then that was right in front of Tarpon Inn down the road.
Yeah.
Then it moved over to what was called Skelly's, where they dredged out that Turtle Cove
Mm-hmm.
and threw up a lot of land there, and you had to go down the station and make a turn to the left.
Right.
And there was the ferry landing was there.
Right.
Then, I guess that was the last move before the new one where it is now, which is exactly opposite.
Now that little railroad, the Radness Harbor Terminal Railway, it wasn't as long as some of the other railroads, it was just as wide. And we had to keep books just according to the Interstate Commerce Commission. And we were audited every year by one of their auditors. And we were given passes on any other railroad we wanted.
Nice.
How was this railroad related to the one that originally took out the original rock that went from here out there. They built a shorter route from here. It said 3 miles to the lighthouse.
Well, the old terminal, pilings are still visible to north of this harbor.
Yeah.
And that was, my understanding, though, that was never completed.
Oh, they never did use it.
Never did complete it. And the piling are still there to this day.
Well, and over on St. Joe, they're still piling over there where it should have come directly across.
Well, maybe it did go there at one time.
Because Danny and I explored that, and the rocks are out there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are quite a few rocks, if you know where.
Well, they might have changed their mind on where the pass was going to be.
Well, the path changed this month. That's what happened.
Yeah, I guess that was it.
It moved south.
Well, that other railroad didn't go to Quarantine Island, did it? Quarantine Shore?
I don't know. I never did.
Headed that direction, I don't know that.
I imagine some of the old timers and Port Rangers could tell you about it.
They're all dying out.
Yeah, you better hurry up.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, did the railroad exist here before the ferry boats, or were the ferry boats here? Well, they couldn't. The railroad had to be here first.
I doubt if there were any ferries as such. It might have been a private ferry. A few people living on the island would probably go by boat, catch a train in when it was out there, or walk in.
Well, I think when Buddy came down the first time, they left their cars at the end of the railroad and took a boat over. They didn't take the car over. Because I remember him telling me that they walked a long ways on those rocks to get to the fish.
I expect that's the way it was. But
And the rocks were not capped with cement at all.
everybody was still talking about the 1919 storm in 1939.
Yeah. And he was down here, I think it was in 1927. He was just a little kid.
Yeah.
So that would have been quite a while.
Do you think that company that used to own it would have any records or anything like that? Like old photographs in their file?
It's not in existence anymore.
I'll tell you who could probably give you that information would be Henry Patton. Henry was traffic manager for the Causeway Company when I went to work for him. He later was with Coastal Materials and was with the bank till just a couple of years ago. He retired. But I don't know if Alexander Brown and Sons and Baltimore is still in existence or not. If they are, I don't know if they have anything in the archives about it.
Yeah.
Well, we certainly do appreciate your taking time to look at it.
My pleasure. I'll probably think of something that I wish I had mentioned after you left. But
Well, I'll come back with a bottle. Yeah.
Oh, that always inspires.
Yeah.
Yeah. Old man Jack Daniels will certainly inspire conversation and dredge up memories.
Yeah. I'll do that.
I think that'd be a good idea.
Can you think of anything else that would put us on a track or anything?
I'll be glad to talk to Henry Patton for you and see if Alexander Brown and Sons, if he knows if they're in existence today or not. And Bird Menor, do you know Bird Menor?
No.
His dad was one of the first seafood business here. He's got quite a memory, a lot of things that he remembers about Port Rangers and Rangers back.
He was a fisherman.
He still is. He guides right now. He's up in here, 70, about 76, I guess he is now.
Yeah, because he was a little younger than Stanley. He and Stanley used to confab on fishing.
What about Barney Carter Jr.?
He's been out of contact with fishing so much.
Yeah.
He doesn't really remember too much about early Puerto Rico. Well, no, I shouldn't say that, but he doesn't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And his father, of course, is gone, and his mother's gone.
Right. What about Miss Florida Roberts?
Well, we're gonna get her on
Yeah.
tape. She was on TV the other day, did you see her?
Yeah, sure did.
Well, they said that she was pretty good.
By the way.
Late in the day was an evening broadcast. But somebody told me about it, and I said, well, I missed that one. And then we're also going to contact Ms. Rose, Kate Carson. She's in the restaurant, but she's pretty alert every so often. We get her on a good day, we may get some interesting things. And then, of course, we're going to get Katie Matthews and Donnie Matthews and Mary McCall. We're working on all of these. If we can just get a bunch of them together, not together, but get the conversation taped, we'll have.
One thing that Causeway Company was still doing when I went to work for them, every year they'd put out these fish signs, had a fish, cut out fish, and they buy it every day. And, they were still doing that. Mr. Keyberger would go out with a truckload of those signs and make a deal with the landowner to put it out. Yeah, get $10 or something like that.
Wasn't there a tale that one of those was found in Korea?
I believe so. People were always getting for souvenirs.
And one of them was found in Europe even. I wouldn't be surprised because they were everywhere. When I wrote this thing for Port Aransas for this woman that's writing a book on the small cities of Texas, I mentioned that.
There was a man who used to come down here, Ronnie Duggar or something like that was his name. The Gulf Oil Company had fishing guides, fine little maps of all the bays, and he was always down here representing them. And also the Atlantic Airlines had what they called the Flying Fishermen's Club, and they'd bring groups down on their planes.
And they had one of those maps of Gulf with a little fish on it and then sign on it. It was like one of those.
Yeah, we could put that on there. That's good.
Maybe Gulf still has something in their file from Port Aransas pictures and so on. Maybe Brandis does.
Yeah.
Gosh, we used to send him that of them.
Yeah.
Where did they land? Where would Brandis land the people?
Well, they landed in Corpus.
On these small cars?
Yeah, small cars. We had a lady was hired after I went to work for the Causeway Company's publicity director. She was the sister of Henry Patton.
Yeah.
Lyle McCaleb. And she was quite a good publicity director. Remember Lloyd Kiesling came down. He developed part of that
Turtle Cove.
And it would seem that Caller Times would have an awful lot in their files.
Yeah.
That you could do.
I had that 100 years. You remember when it was Corpus was 100 years old?
Yeah,
centennial paper they put out. I have that, which you're welcome to use.
Good.
The whole thing. It's getting yellow, but it's
You know, I gave Larry, a Causeway ticket for that bus. I wonder if he still got it. I had it framed and everything.
More than likely.
Maybe I'll get a hold of that.
Yeah.
Take a picture of that.
You gave him one of those wheel chops off the ferry, too.
I sure did, yeah.
He was using it for a doorstop or somewhere.
That's what that piece of metal is. I was telling Gilbert to put on the chimney board to hold a thing on the chimney top so that my air conditioning wouldn't go up the chimney. That's what that is. I've been wondering what that piece of metal was. It's sort of round.
Kind of wedge shaped.
And flat on the bottom and rounded and about this wide, about this deep.
I believe this was a wooden one.
Yeah, these are cheaper kinds.
Well, that's what this is, I bet. I don't know where Stanley got it. It's good and rusty.
Yeah.
That's what that is. Well,
I'm just trying to recall some of the old timers that were working with the Causeway Company at the time I was. I just can't recall any now. They're around.
Well, we just waited a little too long for this because Ansel Brendan's gone, and he would have been real good because he remembered everything.
Right.
And not Florida Roberts, but Godfrey Roberts.
Mhm.
And Gladys Durr's gone, Gladys Rundgren.
Right.
And
There may be others who, are alive who live there and moved away, I don't know.
well, now, Ellie Ray Mercer, who's here, told me that she would see that we got to use, look at or film any of the logs that we really.
Oh, yeah, that's right, the old martial law, that tells a lot.
And, who else have I talked to? Nellie Studeman is going to talk to us someday. And we have quite a list if we can just get to them. And
Any Matthews over there?
yes, Johnny Matthews
Mhm.
and Teddy are, well, and Dora Moore, they're all Matthews, you know.
Yeah, Melvin Littleton.
Melvin's dead. JD's still living.
No.
No, it's just the other way around?
Yeah.
I hadn't been very long since I saw Melvin. I knew he'd been real sick.
No, he's
No,
on.
well, I just have an opposite.
Yeah. JD.
Melvin's alive and JD's dead. And I got them mixed up when they were kids. Just their names, not the kids.
Well, of course, we had those gun emplacements out there during War II.
Yeah. And we had coastal artillery units. No, coastal artillery units. And
You ever see this
Navy.
old brig that they had over there? Was that before your time?
Is that the Calaboose?
Yeah.
It's that down there on the waterfront downtown.
I heard it wasn't too comfortable in there.
Open to the air.
It was air conditioned, wasn't it?
Yes, there was.
Wintertime, especially.
And he has a picture of the volunteer fire department there too. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Boy, they all uniformed up and everything.
Well, we were wondering if it was Coast Guard.
Should well have been, yeah.
Well, if you remember anything, you ought to give me a call. And
I
I'll
will.
come over.
I sure will. I'll look around and
Yeah.
see if I have anything at the house that would be of interest.
Anything we can photograph and anything that we can talk about even will help us a lot. We're going to go to a meeting in Corpus the 23rd, 24th, and 25th at night
Mm-hmm.
on how to do this.
Yeah.
We hope that's what they're going to tell us.
So many places you go to, like in the hill country, they have museums now.
Yeah.
And, I think when people find out what you're trying to do, they come up with a lot of things voluntarily.
Yeah, I think so too. And if we could just get a little bit, I think we need to get a little more publicity on this. If we could get it in the paper,
Mm-hmm.
both here and Fort Ramsey, it would help. That little TV thing helps a bunch out there on the island. Nobody did for a library.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We haven't bought one book yet, and we have over 8,000 volumes, and they're good books. They're not.
Dennis Dreyer's still around. He'd know a lot. He's been there
Yeah.
all his life, didn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Ed Dyer's one we need to see that.
I saw him down at the dump the other day. I helped him load up some lumber, and I better hurry and talk to him because he was panting.
Yeah. Don't wait too long.
And then there's Annie Bell and Molly's over here. They was retired.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's see, August Matheson's kids. Are there any of those there? Dorothy and
Yeah.
Manon and I don't remember those boys' names. I think there were 11 of those kids. I should remember some of them. But we can get Dorothy is still around somewhere.
I heard Manon was over here.
Manon is a little mixed up right now. I talked to her one day and she wasn't really like with us, kind of like Sammy. She's way back down there instead of, and mixed up too.
Yeah.
Sammy's beginning to mix up his Michigan fishing and his Port Aransas fishing and get kind of up and then
Stay down here.
Yeah, play this thing out.
turn that thing off.
Been on me
Well,
enough.
we get on the families here, we don't want to